أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the most merciful, all praise is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wherever you are, whatever time it may be, we begin by greeting you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you and your loved ones, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And once again, thank you for joining us here on our program. Let us talk about it. Massacres, mass shootings are not something new that we hear about in the news. In fact, there was one today that took place, if I remember correctly, in Virginia, I want to say, where 5 people were shot, including a doctor who's been practicing in that neighborhood since 1981, along with his 2 grandchildren. So you hear these almost on weekly basis. I don't want to say on daily basis, and we just shrug it off as if this has just been a weekly happenings. But this last week, though, it hit home because this time there was a massacre, and it happened to be that the perpetrator, as well as the person who committed suicide and murder, were all of the Muslim community. And I remember I've been getting emails, I've been getting texts, I've been getting phone calls, just people just not knowing what to think, how to react, or what is to be done about it. And it also happened to be that the person who took his life and the life of those who were around them, their family members, the 2 brothers who killed their family members, they also left a letter behind, or at least one of them left a letter behind. Also, a bit personal for me because this kid actually went to UT Austin, and I remember I actually had to read the letter in 2 settings. I did not just read the entire letter. And in the letter, as I was reading, he was talking about how excited he was when he got accepted to UT Austin, and that is when I just stopped reading the letter because I remember I was very excited when I got accepted to UT Austin, and I just did not want. I was not sure if I've met this individual before during my time at UT Austin or not. So I remember at that point I just did not want to continue reading the letter, and I said I'm going to read this, at a later time. But to talk about this tragedy and what that means and how are people to react, what does it mean to mental health professionals, what does it mean to our community, to our imams, and to our families, I have the pleasure of inviting back into the show our beloved sister, Menahal Begawala. Menahal, it's so good to have you back in the show. I wish that,
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. I wish that we had you back for something, you know what? I won't say other than this. So it is indeed a tragedy. And like I said, wallahi, I know I was going to have you back in the show, but I did not know it was for this. And the reason why we chose Manahil is part of her specialty is that she specializes in. She's a licensed clinician, of course, but she is also her specialty is in trauma, and this is as traumatic as it can get. Manahil, you had a chance to read the letter, as not as a clinician. Do you remember your reaction when you just went through that and found out about what happened?
It's I don't have to remember my reaction much at all because even as we just start talking about it now, I can feel my stomach just nodding up. I can feel the weight that this bears. I can feel the heaviness of the impact of these stories, and not stories, real life events, for each one of us individually and for our community as a whole. So my reaction is just it's a little numb, but not numb in a way that like I don't care, but numb in a way that this is so much to carry. And yeah, it's quite heavy. It's quite heavy.
I remember as I was reading, I was having all kinds of emotions going on. It wasn't like one thing that was happening. There was a sense of disbelief. Throughout the letter, I'm screaming, why? And then to be honest with you, I think I was also very, very angry, like really, really angry as to why it had to end this way. Like you said, there was that part of numbness, and as you know, as a clinician, and you know this very well, one thing that we do when we have clients who report that they are depressed, one thing that we check for is, you know, suicidality. Are they thinking about suicide? Have they tried it before? Are they contemplating? Do they have a plan? Do they have any ideation about it? But I remember I was really, really angry, and I would say that this is actually the most dominant feeling I have had since I read that letter. So when you say that you felt numb, have you had the chance to talk to people and see how they reacted to what there was?
Um, and to be honest, my conversations have mostly been with, and not even active conversations. I'm part of some groups with Muslim mental health professionals who have been discussing, just how to approach this as clinicians, processing a little bit of how difficult this is for us, being part of the Muslim community, and just trying to wrap our heads around how to make sense of such a tragedy, how to make sense of something that just seems so senseless. And then how can we figure out how to support our communities in healing from this, in bringing about change that we all know is so necessary. Um, and so I haven't had any personal conversations on it. And I that's, I think, somewhat of a privilege, as I don't, living in New York, there hasn't been as much of a direct impact. Though on a local forum, the letter was posted, and I did urge the moderator to take it down because I don't think it's healthy for us to read the letter, for it to, even mental health professionals are having a hard time wrapping their heads around it. But, in addition to that, one of the conversations that has come up is, it's so easy to speculate. And it's so easy to say, yes, depression, this, that, and, talk about diagnoses and, clinical things, but we don't have all the information. And so it puts us as a community in a place of a lot of speculation. The only person who could have helped us understand anything or arrive at something definitive in terms of mental illness, a diagnosis, anything like that, that person is no longer here. So there really is no benefit for the community in reading the letter itself. The issues that are brought up in the letter, there is benefit in talking about those issues as they are prevalent in our community. But the letter itself just carries a lot of sentiments that are difficult to swallow, and they're coming from a person who was deeply disturbed.
Okay. So Manahil, you said a lot there that needs to be unpacked, and that
Sorry.
is as a that's okay. As clinicians, you know, there was this dialogue that is taking place as to what is the best approach. Community should not be reading the letter, the much needed change, the avoidance of speculation. If you can just take us through that, it's like, okay, so how is one to process what just took place?
Well, the first piece of, how to process what just took place is to actually just create a forum for dialogue, to create a forum for all of the different feelings that might be coming up around this topic. What are people experiencing? Making room for people who do suffer from depression, who do on a day-to-day go through this, because this can also be very triggering for them. Making room for parents, because this is, children that, well, they had not children age-wise, but they took their families with them. And so making space for the community to talk about the grief, the fear, the concerns, all of these things, making it normal within our communities to have these conversations. I think that's what we have to do as a community.
And how would that benefit us in, like, so you're talking about normalizing the conversation? Is this what you're referring to?
That's definitely one piece of the puzzle. One piece of a larger puzzle is normalizing the conversation, and that does a couple of things. Number one, that helps remove the stigma. right? So if I'm someone who lives with depression and I live in a community where it's almost like, if I hear somebody say, oh, yeah, this is hard, but I don't have depression, I don't need counseling, then I'm going to feel ashamed if I am suffering with more feelings of heaviness, or I don't even know if it's depression. So even that kind of like, oh, I don't need it. Yes, but I recommend therapy and stuff, but I don't need it. Right? It's one thing that I'm very with all of my clients, and I don't shy away from speaking about it openly. I think we all need therapy, and I my person, personally have gone to therapy. I continue where life just feels a little bit heavier. It doesn't have to be a major thing, but when it feels major, it's even more important to get help. So, normalizing the conversation, number one, removes some of that stigma. Okay. Sheikh, are you able to see and hear me okay?
Yes, we are. I mean,
Okay.
we did lose you for like half a second there, but we are able to see you and hear you um, well.
Okay.
Okay. So I see what you're
Okay.
saying. The whole notion of when we speak about it, people who may need the help, and we make these statements such as, well, this is what happens when you're depressed, well, this is what depression leads to, we further isolate these people, and they would, want to isolate themselves more because now we are
Hmm.
somehow guilting them, or somehow we're shaming them for having depression. So that's what we're after by openly creating safe spaces for people to have a conversation about about these topics. Alrighty, and that
Hmm.
helps reduces the stigma about mental health in general. Alrighty, so
Hmm.
we have these forms, and you said that it is a place for parents as well as for children, or you said it's for people who also have depression. What are we supposed to be saying in these conversations or in this forum?
So in these forums, I think number one, we have to again talk about what are the signs. If someone is depressed, what are some of the things to look out for? Also, creating community wide intervention plans, right? So, there should be, within the community, kind of a sense of like, okay, what do we do if we feel like someone is very depressed, if someone might be suicidal? How do we address this without it being punitive? What are the procedures to follow? These are things that we should all be aware of. Who are the professionals in the area that, we can turn to? Because this intervention by colleagues or friends can only take over. Not everyone is equipped to know what to do, but everyone should be equipped with the resources. And so I think that's one part of the conversation that has to be present, which is an awareness of the resources. They should be easily available to everyone. Everyone should know who to reach out to.
Nice.
That's one. Um,
And
yeah.
Manahil, sorry, I know that as a clinician, sometimes we mention these things and we make the assumption that everybody might know the answer to them. So you speak about we have to be able to recognize when somebody is depressed. What does a depressed person look like? What do we look for?
So someone who has depression might show signs. So if you notice someone that has all of a sudden stopped paying attention, or like stopped showing up, right? So they might be isolating themselves if they aren't receiving calls. If you haven't seen them around for a while. If sometimes people will say, "Yeah, I'm really depressed," you know. Um, Sometimes you'll notice people just show like a lot of negative self-talk. They talk about themselves in a negative way. You might notice that people are, you know, engaging in behaviors and this is a little bit more towards suicidality, but engaging in risky behaviors. Um, Depression and also suicidality might also manifest in sleep changes. You might see someone, something that's standard that I have seen, and this was when I worked at a clinic. People who are depressed would often like not take showers, not take care of themselves at all. So they might be disheveled. They might smell. You know, any of these things
Okay.
are indicators of suicide. Sorry, of depression. exacerbate, that it might be, you might see people kind of getting their affairs in order, giving away all their belongings, engaging in risky behavior. These are even more uh, to be, to be not to be dismissed, I should say, because these are indicators of suicidality.
Got it. So change in sleep pattern, change in eating pattern, people eating too much, eating too little, poor hygiene, social isolation, sometimes people giving away their most adored belongings, people who express low energy most of the time, sadness, loss of hope, talking about death. And then the point here is not to psychoanalyze the people that are living with you, but these would be difficult signs to miss that the person is behaving this way, especially if that's not how they have been. You want to pick on these changes and point these things out. All right. And then you said that people ought to have access to resources. The imam of the masjid, I think that's like the biggest, the first resource that we in the Muslim community go to. And this is not just in the Muslim community. I know that in other communities of faith, people go to their pastor, they want to talk to their rabbi. And clergies or members of the clergy are the first people that seek out. What do you mean when you say resources?
So, alhamdulillah, we're blessed with our imams who are our first responders in a sense. Um, in addition, or our imams should, I think in cases like this, be a gateway, right? That this burden is not one that the imam should have to bear on his own. So by resources, I mean mental health professionals, so therapists, who are the area, grief counselors, for example. If someone is, and this is, we're talking, if someone is depressed or showing suicidal ideation, right? Also connecting them with, at some point, if it's really bad, if you think that someone is in imminent danger, even taking them to the local emergency room, right? There are suicide hotlines. There are, various other resources. Communities have different resources. So I would say knowing kind of where the professional resources are as opposed to just the imam, because that's only going to take a person so far. Alhamdulillah, we have Muslim mental health professionals that are providing training for imams, but also the professional people who are trained in managing these things. I think it's really important to know who they are.
Got it. I am personally of the opinion that it would be best to go to a counselor or a therapist that is preferably Muslim or at least culturally competent. And that's a question that I get most of the time. If I choose to go to a therapist, does the therapist have to be a Muslim?
And are you asking me to
I
also
am. I
reflect
am.
on
So,
that?
what are your thoughts on regarding this?
So I have what might be a less popular opinion on this matter. I think that the ideal situation is to have a Muslim therapist. I think where I live in New York, we are very blessed to have a lot of Muslim therapists available. However, there are other places in the country where Muslim therapists just aren't as many in number, if any at all. And so a Muslim therapist is ideal. However, I, as being a Muslim, have treated, people of all faiths, including religious Jews and Christians. And they come and there's an awareness there that this is a person of faith, right? Who will understand my commitment to my faith. There's also a sense of someone who's, like you said, culturally competent. So I think that if a Muslim therapist is ideal, however, here's the piece that I want to, where I think my opinion may be less popular. I think it's more important to have a therapist who is competent in the specific area that a person is seeking help in.
Hmm.
So if a person is seeking help specifically in, let's say, my area is trauma. So, a person specifically has like sexual trauma, right? Or, grew up in an abusive home, that takes a different type of therapy, I think, to be most effective. Not that, all therapies aren't effective. I'm also biased, right? But I think it's more important for a person then to seek a therapist who specializes in that field. Let's say grief counseling. Every therapist can do that, but if it's something as tragic as this, we want to find the resources. First of all, if a Muslim therapist is not available, find whoever is available, right? Um, that does come with the possibility that the therapist is not a good fit, right? That they just don't understand, and you might have to try a different therapist. So that is a possibility, but I do think that it's important to find a therapist who will speak to the particular issue that you are struggling with.
Got it. And in this particular case, the people in I think it's Allentown in Texas, let's say, would they experience that trauma differently than, let's say, us being in Memphis or you being in New York?
I think so. I think so, because it's the local community. These might have been people that, the community saw coming and going from the masjid, or they may have known them in some capacity, or it's just, I don't know. And I am not saying this clinically, or, it's not based on any research, but just my gut is that I do think that it hits closer to home, quite literally, for people in Texas, people in Allen specifically.
Got it. All right. Then. As I was reading the letter, and by the way, if you just joined us, my guest this evening is Menahal Begawala, who is a licensed clinician as well as expertise. Her expertise is on trauma, and we're talking about the Texas massacre that took place. And if you have a question, please do use the chat box on YouTube as we are live, and we will take your questions and address them to Menahel. So as I was reading the letter, there were different pieces. So, this individual did speak about depression. And then there was something else that they spoke about, and that is their coping mechanism. How did they cope with depression? And specifically, it was a bit graphic the way that he described the cutting procedure that he went through. If you can just tell us, like, what is cutting, not that we are promoting it. Remember, there is a difference between acknowledging and encouraging. At this point, we're only acknowledging what we've heard. We're not encouraging, of course, the behavior. You hear a lot about cutting, and somehow cutting is usually associated with young girls, but not so with young men. So what is cutting, and why do people cut?
So, cutting is one form of self harm. And before I continue this, I just want to point out that if there's anyone in the audience who struggles with self harm, who struggles with thoughts of wanting to hurt themselves, this might be a little bit triggering. And so it might be, I would kind of tread with caution if you're choosing to listen. Just ensure that you're taking some breaths, that you're, sitting in a comfortable space where you can handle and manage the information that's about to follow, because it may be triggering for a person who already has these thoughts, right? And as Shaykh Yasir mentioned, there's a difference between acknowledging and encouraging, and there's also a difference between acknowledging and shaming. So we're not neither shaming nor encouraging this behavior, but we are acknowledging it as a coping mechanism, one form of self-harm that's used for coping with difficulty. There are numerous forms of self-harm that are used, and cutting is one of them. And it can be used for a number of reasons. One that we commonly hear about is that the feelings inside are so difficult and so intense that shifting the focus to physical pain is actually relieving in some way, right? And so if we look at any form of self-harm, it is actually being used as a way to help oneself manage something else, right? And so the other thing that I've seen clinically with clients who self-harm is having a sense of control. So in one case, it might be that the feelings are too big, the depression is too heavy, or, a person is just in so much pain that they might resort to hurting themselves physically to shift the focus from the emotional pain to the physical pain. The other is also if a person has experienced some form of abuse, something that rendered them powerless. Self-harm might be a means of regaining control, and so this is what I've heard in clinical settings, is, at least I can control the pain that is inflicted on me. And so this is another situation. So again, the self-harm is used as a means of escaping some form of pain, whether it's emotional pain or whether it's pain that's being inflicted upon someone. Um, yeah.
When I have my clients, usually I ask these questions about coping, and that is, what do you do to deal with this situation? And most of the time, over 90% of the times, young men, they tend to use smoking marijuana as the number one go-to coping mechanism. And for
Hmm.
young girls, I also see that I inquire about self-harm, and self-harm or cutting also comes in as a form of coping mechanism. And what I tell people, and I share this with our viewers and would love to hear your thoughts on it, is that these coping mechanisms are temporary fix. They're coping mechanisms, but they're poor coping mechanisms. And maybe this is only what's available to this individual, or that's the only thing that they have in their toolbox. So with marijuana, it does take care of the anxiety, or it helps you sleep. But once that anxiety leaves, when it comes back with more intensity. So now you either have to increase the frequency or the amount of what you're smoking. And with the self harm, what I saw in this letter is that he said he would cut once every 2 weeks, and then it would be once a week, and then it became daily, and then it became several times a day. So I know that you said that, look, we are acknowledging, we are not shaming at the same time. We're just trying to understand, it's like, what happens when people employ these types of coping mechanism. So let's say if somebody is engaged and that is their choice of coping mechanism, what do they do?
You mean like engaged in self-harm?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, so there are two things I'll say about this. The first is in terms of frequency, right? There is a rush, an endorphin rush that comes with cutting, right? And so a person will kind of turn to that, and there is something for a person in that much pain when a cut is made and it feels pleasurable in some way, and so it does become something, almost addictive, right? If we kind of look at this from a trauma lens, again, I kind of mentioned this before, that it's an escape. It's a form of flight away from pain to something that is perceived in this state as pleasure, even, you know? And so the frequency, there's an endorphin rush that comes with it, which might be leading to the frequency. It's just like, um, anything, right? So sometimes people will turn to food for coping, right? And so there's an addictive quality to that as well. So that's one thing. Um, the other thing that you mentioned about, people smoking marijuana or turning to cutting, at the end of the day, yes, it is something that's a short-term fix. The fact is, people do it because it's a fix. And again, not a fix that's healthy, not a fix that's good for you, not a fix that's going to have any long term benefits. But to these things, the relationship that the problem underneath, the cause of the pain is not being addressed. That is still there. So until and unless we don't address what's happening underneath these behaviors, a person is going to keep needing the band-aid. If a person's arm is broken and you put a band-aid, you don't deal with the broken arm. No matter how many band-aids you put, you'll still need more.
Hmm. Nice. I've also read that people who cut themselves or who engage in self harm, it is one way of, especially if they're feeling numb, and sometimes we do feel that way, and desensitized, that becomes their way of feeling grounded, that they belong, that they are back. They have to physically want to harm themselves in such a way to get that feeling of regaining their feelings because of how numb they have been
Hmm.
they have been feeling.
Hmm.
Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's, if we don't deal with what's causing the numbness, we're essentially it's a short-term solution.
Okay. Menahil, there is something else, and again, I don't want to engage in what you referred earlier as speculation, but I think that we are using the letter that this individual has left as a guideline in attempting to understand what took place. And one thing, as I was reading the letter, and at least the one that I got was like six long pages, is that this person did see a therapist before. They were on medication. In fact, they doubled their medication, and they did acknowledge that their medication, when they doubled it, did work for them. The question that sometimes people would have is, why should I believe in therapy and medication? Obviously, both therapy and medication did not work for this individual.
Hmm. And I'll say what I said before is that we actually don't know the full facts. We don't know what was going on. We don't know if there was some previous trauma. We don't know if there was something in the family dynamic. We don't know. We have no idea, and there's a level of angst in the letter. There's anger, there's rage. Um, I mean, I think you and I can both agree that saying, I don't want my family to feel pain, so I'm going to kill them. That's a mindset that is outside of, I can't say yes, a depressed person would say that. I don't think they would, So there was something more going on here. I don't know what it was, you know. Um, so for me to believe, here's the thing. As human beings, we will believe what we want to believe. If you come to this letter already with the belief that therapy is not going to work and medication won't work, then great, you have proof for it. There are studies, there are numerous different types of therapies. Now, I'll also say this, not there's no one therapy that's right for everybody. So maybe this person didn't receive the type of therapy that he needed, you know. I don't know.
Okay.
But what I can say is that alhamdulillah, what I know without a shadow of a doubt is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us human beings with resilience and the natural movement towards healing. Even physically, as you know, if we get hurt, we scab, we heal, and we move forward. If you have an illness, if you take care of it, your body will heal. The same thing is true of mental and emotional difficulties as well. Yes, there are some things that will leave a scar without a doubt, but our bodies and brains can heal. And so if someone says it didn't work, then I will say, well, it's possible that that one modality, that one medication, that one type of therapy didn't work best for you. Those are not the only remedies out there. And just like if you go to a doctor and they prescribe you one medication, it doesn't work for you, you'll try a different medication. You'll go to a naturopath or a holistic doctor, or you'll go for acupuncture. You'll try different things, right? It is harder to find motivation when a person is depressed, yes. But I do believe without a shadow of a doubt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us with the capacity, and not only the capacity, but the natural movement towards healing. And, you know, I again, it's heart-wrenching that this person wasn't able to find a mode of healing that worked for him. But for someone to use this letter to say, oh, well, why should I believe in therapy and medication? Um, I would say maybe there's some, beliefs that they're coming into it with that are just being confirmed.
Got it. Got it. The other thing also in the letter, and by no means we are, psychoanalyzing this individual on the basis of the
Mm.
letter that they wrote. This is just an attempt to understand what was going on. And I think you pointed out that, you know what, there were several things in the letter that you wanted to talk about, and I'll give you a chance to do so. But one thing that also people pointed out is the seemingly lack of religiosity in the letter. This is a person that grew up, you know, again, we're not speculating, but just based on what we know so far, is that there was no reference to Quran, there is no reference to Islam, there is no reference to religion, there is no reference to Deen, there is no reference to God. I think I did see the word God in two places, and I don't think that they were appropriate. The usage of it, I think he referred to himself as a programming God, but that was the only place that I can remember where God appeared in that letter. And sometimes people would look into this and they would point out that the lack of religiosity, lack of iman, lack of spirituality definitely contributes to depression, to anxiety, to all kinds of forms of mental illnesses.
So, you know, what I definitely want to make clear is that if a person is depressed, it does not mean that they lack iman. Okay? It is very possible for a person to have strong iman, to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and still suffer from depression or anxiety or any other mental illness. You know, the flip side of it is that if a person is suffering, one's religiosity, being able to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking support through religion, can be a huge resource, can be a huge form of support for a person, right? So it can strengthen a person. Now, the fact that this person didn't mention religion, does that make it like, oh, if they were more religious, maybe they wouldn't? Again, I can't say. And I don't think that it would be fair to make that speculation. You know, I can't speak to that. It's just, I don't think it's fair. And I think it's oversimplifying a much more complex situation.
Okay, I have two more places in the letter that have been pointed out, and then I'll give you, like I said, the chance to see which parts of the letter, you know, got your attention. He also spoke about how when he told his friends that he was depressed, people did not stick around, or people would say, "You can talk to me," but then they just, you know, he said that, and I think he commented by saying that he does not blame them. So this idea of when people come to us and they tell us about the challenges that they're going through, be it in the form of depression or mental health related issues, what are we to do, and what responsibilities do we have towards these people?
And I'm glad you mentioned this because this is an important thing that did stand out to me. And it's, you know, everyone has their role, right? Friends are not an emotional dumping ground. You know, um, we as mental health professionals have to be very on top of our self-care in terms of making sure we're, you know, getting adequate time to make sure that we're not affected by all taking in through our clients, right? It's something that we're trained to do, something that we're very conscious of. Now, you know, as a mental health professional, if someone comes into my office and tells me all these things, I'm there, I'm trained to work with that. As a friend, that's not my role. And so, you know, if I have a friend that's suffering with that, I'm not their therapist. I can give them words of encouragement. I can listen to them. I can be kind to them. I can help them, you know, I can be present with them. Um, you know, I can do all of those things. I can just ask them, like, hey, listen, so are you really thinking about doing something? Are you planning to carry out this thing? You know, listen, you know, we all care about you and I'm here for you. Let me help you get help, right? So it's about every person knowing their role. As a friend, I cannot take on that heaviness of a person person's full-on depression and suicidality, right? An imam is not equipped for that, right? Um, Even a family member isn't necessarily equipped with that. And so, if there was this point made about, oh, everyone puts up these mental health quotes, and push the words exactly, something along those lines. And yes, people put up mental health quotes. Does that mean that they know how to deal with someone who's depressed? No. And I don't say that they don't know how to deal with them and that a person who's depressed is something to be dealt with, but they don't know how to help you remedy that. Clinicians have interventions, they have tools that help to actually make, some headway into various mental illnesses. An average person doesn't have that. The best they can do is listen, and that's very helpful, but it would be unfair to, I can't go to any like guy on the street and say, help me fix my car. I can say, hey, my car's not running. Oh my God, this is frustrating. But I can't say, hey, come, be my mechanic. Right. That would be silly. I can't, if I fracture, my pinky, I can say, oh my God, ow, it hurts. And you might say, oh my God, that's horrible. But I'm not going to say, here, fix it for me. You're not a medical doctor. Right. So there's that. We have to make that distinction. Not everyone is equipped, nor should everyone have to know how to take you further. People can help you. As a friend, you can say, hey, help me help you. Let's look up. I've had that happen where people have called and said, hey, look, my friend is really struggling. She agreed to let me help her. Can I make an appointment for her to come see you? I mean, as a first step, that's okay. After that, confidentiality and HIPAA comes into play. But that first step, if you need help, get that first step. Let someone tell someone, look, I'm really struggling. I'm really suffering. Help me find a therapist.
Got it. And then the last point was he said that the people who stuck around are the people who were obligated to do so. And I think he made a specific reference to his father when he spoke to his father about his depression. He said that his dad really tried to help him. So I know that you said that friends were not an emotional dumping ground. And you also said that family members are not necessarily that, but we expect more from our family members. So what happens when a loved one, when I'm talking about like a sibling, a child, a family member comes and tells me this or confides in me that they're going through this?
Same thing. I think that, working with them to say, help me, let's work together and find someone for you to see, and I'll support you, whether that's taking you to the appointments, whether that's making sure for telehealth now that you have a private space to see the therapist, whether that means paying for it. Support comes in many different forms, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that's the best thing that you can do for a struggling family member is get them the support that they need. Make sure that you're keeping an eye on them. Follow up with them. You know, you're not you don't have to take on the weight of what they're going through, right? But it is human decency to follow up and say, "Hey, how are you feeling?" You know, let's go out to eat, or let's go get a cup of coffee or some ice cream or something. Don't say you care and then disappear. That's what I'll say. If you've been someone that someone opened up to, follow up with them. Let them know that you're thinking about them. You know, if you're able to touch base with them in person. If not, at least, touch base with them virtually or over the phone, but offer them help in the form of getting them professional help.
Got it. I'm sorry. I just wanted to give you a chance to say what stood out for you in that letter when you read it.
Um, Sheikh, I think we touched on some of the most important points. And when I, would think about like what stood out to me, I honestly I had a very hard time reading it. So I did not read it thoroughly, to be very honest with you. I only skimmed it very superficially because even skimming it was becoming quite heart-wrenching. Um, the concerns that I had or more so how parents might respond, because I can definitely see how this, letter would leave parents in a heightened state of anxiety regarding their own children.
Mm.
And that's the one thing I did want to touch upon is, as parents, if you're concerned, have the conversation with your child. Don't shame them, don't make them feel bad or like a burden if they are
I'm
struggling, if
sorry.
you notice that they.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, Menahel, but say that if you're concerned as a parent, what are you concerned about? What is that conversation, and how do you begin the conversation?
Okay, so if you're concerned, and that concern could be changes in behavior with your child, they're not eating, or they're staying up all night, or they're just stuck in their bedroom the whole day, they're not talking to you, they're not talking to anyone, anything like that, where you are concerned, changes in behavior, things that to you in your gut just feel like, I think something's wrong, right? So if you're concerned, that's the what that might concern you. You might notice that your child goes into the bathroom right after they eat every single time, right? We don't know. There might be an eating disorder at play, right? Um, so these are things that, pay attention. First of all, even before concern, pay attention to your children. Let them know that you see them, not physically see them, but that you see them for who they are, the struggles that they might be going through. Um, and and you said, what's the conversation to have? Was that your second
That's
question?
yeah. What's the conversation to have? But also, one struggle that parents share with me is I always attempt to talk to my children, but they don't seem that they want to talk back to me. I can ask all I
Hmm.
want, but I just don't get anything back from them.
Okay. Um, so what is a conversation to be had? I think the core of any conversation should be one of curiosity and compassion. That's the core of it. Whatever the conversation is, saying, "Hey, I feel really quiet lately. What's going on?" If a parent says, "You've been really quiet. Come on, you should talk to people more." That's not curious, nor is it compassionate.
Mm.
If you start throwing solutions and you start telling your kid what to do, it tells your child that you're not really interested in what's happening. You're just interested in fixing them. And when a person is going through this, they need to know, one of the things that I find, um, with clients, especially adult clients, is the pain that they face when parents do not allow them the space to feel. So if they're sad, we say, don't be sad. If they're upset about something, to you, it might not be a big deal. You say, what's the big deal? Who cares? Whatever. For a teenager, their social life is everything. And if they're feeling excluded, or if they're feeling bad about themselves because of everything that they see on social media, or they might feel like they've been left out of something, or I say, oh, that's not a big deal. That's not something to be upset about. There are bigger things in life. Think about what's happening to children in this country or that country. Yes, that's a tragedy, but don't compare tragedies. This is hard. Create space for those feelings. And so, in terms of the what is the conversation to be had? It's more about how should the conversation be had, with compassion and curiosity. Hey, what's going on? Help me understand this. And if they say they're about upset about something, or they don't respond, be like, okay, look, I know you don't want to talk to me, that's how I feel. But if you ever do, I'm here. Also, if you prefer to talk to a therapist, we can work with that too. And if that might help you talk to me, or it might help me understand what you're going through, I'm open to that. Right? There's no shame in that. I don't think that there's any parent that could be equipped to know everything there is to know about parenting in this day and age. Things are changing, drastically within days, weeks, months. Social media outlets that were not here a year ago have taken over now. In another year or two, it's going to be something else. There's no way for us to keep up with the changing world of children. So there's no shame in asking for help. It's not a personal failure on your part if you don't know, or if you don't understand, or if you can't keep up. But it is on you to find the help and the support to keep up because you are the parent and you brought this person into the world. So the conversation is more about how you have it. Your tone will say far more than your words.
Nice. And again, these concerns, like you said, is it okay for the parents to be very blunt about it? I recognize that you're not eating, that you go to the bathroom every time. Should they be hinting it, or should they just say what it is that they're observing?
Yep, don't dance around it. Don't dance around it because then you're like, oh, should I like be jokey about it? Like, oh, are you? No, be straightforward. Hey, look, I've noticed this and I'm concerned. What's going on? If they feel like you're blaming them, if they feel like you're going to yell at them, if they feel like you're going to say it's not a big deal, they're not going to talk to you. But if you can be direct about it, say, hey, look, these are X, Y, and Z, you know, and I'm really worried. What's going on? You know, come to it with a genuine curiosity of wanting to understand your child, not, I have to say it's hard to do this, but if you can achieve this, it will be very helpful for you as a parent. Don't panic because parents immediately jump to, oh no, oh my God, no, they're going to leave the deen. They're going to ruin their life. They're going to panic. At that right then and there, you are with your child. Be with your child. Let your child experience what it's like to be in the emotional safety of your presence, right? And be direct. Be direct. Be open. Yes.
Okay, so no dancing around it. If you do see signs of depression, ask. Anxiety, ask. Eating disorder, ask. Somebody is isolating themselves, ask.
Self
Create
harm.
a safe self harm, create a safe atmosphere. And I like what you said last. Let your children enjoy the safety of your emotional presence. I think that's how
Hmm.
you said it. That
Hmm.
was beautiful, mashallah. Menahel, always a joy to have you on the show. And like I said earlier, it is, I really was not hoping that this is what we would be talking about when I, had in mind that we would have you back. But Jazakallah khair for coming on and responding to this very, very difficult situation. Alrighty, so are you yourself, do you make yourself available? Let's say if people from around the country want to get in touch with you, is that something that you would do?
So that's a tough one because I'm licensed in New York, so and New Jersey. So that's primarily where my clients are from. I do consultations with people who are outside of New York and New Jersey, but anything that requires a deep therapeutic intervention, I my attempt is always to help them find someone local who can help them.
Nice, because I know that people are going to be asking, so I just wanted to make sure that they hear it from you. As licensed clinicians, we can only practice within the jurisdictions that we are licensed in. And I know that in California, both the client as well as the therapist, they have to be in the same state unless it was, just
Is that right?
keeping in touch. Yes, in California,
Uh-huh.
both have to be in the state unless the client is traveling outside of the state and they're just keeping in touch with their therapist. But otherwise, both parties have to be in. And the rationale behind this is has to do with resources. That where I am, I know where I can get my resources. But if somebody is in a different state, I would not know what kind of resources I can help them. I can help them with.
Right.
Beautiful. We didn't get any question, but we did have people expressing their appreciation specifically. I don't have a specific question, but really appreciate it, and they are thanking and sending their salams. So to you, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And to you, Manahil, jazakallah
Waalaikum
khair.
salam.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you best, Ya Rabbal Alameen. And to all of our
Oh,
viewers,
yeah.
may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us all safe and sound, Ya Rabbal Alameen, and grant us good mental health as well as spiritual health, increase us in Iman. Inshallah, next week is going to be the month of Ramadan. So I believe that this is the last time that we are going to see you. We will not be here during Ramadan. And I know Ramadan is not here yet, Manahil, but Ramadan Mubarak to you and your
Alhamdulillah.
family. And may we live, inshallah, to witness the blessings of the month of Ramadan. And until we
آمين.
see you next time, we say so long and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاكم الله خيرا for having me.